Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched the Fantastic Four First Steps. Let's talk about it. So yes, Marvel's first family has finally arrived into the MCU. The Fantastic Four First Steps is directed by Matt Shakman, who previously worked on WandaVision. So clearly he has a pretty strong reputation over in Marvel HQ. And so he has been charged with directing the very first film centered on these characters that were previously owned by Fox but now fall under the Disney empire after Disney acquired Fox a few years back. So it's taken a while to really start to see the fruits of all of that acquisition labor, but we finally arrived at the doorstep of Marvel's first family, fully integrated into the MCU. This is a big deal for everyone involved, including me. And so today we're going to be diving into my thoughts on this film. And if that sounds fun to you guys, then stay tuned. And as always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy my reviews to let YouTube and me know. Now without further ado guys, let's dive into this. So those of you who have been around here in this little corner of the internet for a minute may remember that just last year I made a video diving into all of my unpopular opinions that was like comic book movie related, and in that video I made some pretty bold claims, one of them being that, hi, my name is Jean and I don't really care about the Fantastic Four. I didn't really care about the Fantastic Four. I know a lot of people were really looking forward to seeing Marvel's first family materialize in the MCU. But I just felt like now that we're on our fourth live action iteration of these characters and of these stories, and they've all flopped previously, I didn't really have high hopes for this one. And not to mention, you know, my belief has always been that the best Fantastic Four movie that you could ever get was already made by Pixar in the form of The Incredibles that was directed by Brad Bird. Brad Bird already did that. He already did the thing. So what could the MCU possibly do to top that? Well, fast forward now about a year, having seen the Fantastic Four First Steps, I can confidently say that nothing can be done. Nothing can be done to top The Incredibles, but I will give Marvel and Matt Shakman credit where credit is due because they came so damn close. Guys, this film was a hit. Yes, it was. I had the time of my life with the Fantastic Four First Steps. I really think that this gave these characters the perfect first steps into the MCU. This name works on so many different levels, right? Because you're dealing with the first steps of Marvel's first family coming into the MCU. You're also dealing with Franklin, oh baby Franklin, who arrives in a spectacular fashion in this movie, and the fact that he's a baby, he's gonna have his first steps as well. So like, this name is very clever now that I've seen the film. But I am pleased to say that this film was a wonderful introduction to this fourth live action iteration of Marvel's first family. And Marvel's first family is really how this version of the Fantastic Four are sold. That is the central ethos to these characters. And there is a distinct difference between how the Fantastic Four is depicted versus other teams across the MCU, where we have the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers. The dynamics here are completely different because we are dealing with an actual family. I mean, here we have a husband and wife in Sue and Reed, and then we also have, you know, Sue and Johnny, who are brother and sister. And even though Ben isn't biologically related to Reed, he's Reed's best friend, so he's basically like Reed's brother as well. And then you have Herbie, who's their biological son, like he's their first son. Okay, before Franklin comes along. And so you have this one big happy family, which, like I said, has a very different dynamic to the Avengers, to the Guardians, to the other teams that we have seen across the MCU. And I really loved that dynamic. I really loved how Max Shackman clearly took quite a few lessons from his work on WandaVision, which is very family centered, right? And was able to apply that and translate that over to the Fantastic Four with great effect. And not to mention the actors as well really played into that family dynamic so well, which created this really warm and inviting feeling within the Fantastic Four headquarters. Things like them, you know, having dinner at a regular time, and also that kind of heavy focus on protecting their family, and especially when Franklin comes along, protecting him. He is their blood, and so there's a different level of protection there, even to when we saw the Avengers try to avenge Phil Coulson. Remember that? That's the reason why they're the Avengers. But even in comparison to that, the Fantastic Four gathered around Franklin, ready to protect him at all costs because he was their blood. Not to mention, you have Sue very cleverly kind of buying into the idea of family and expanding it across the whole world once her baby comes into danger and people start blaming her for not giving her child away. Crazy. But not giving her child away to save the planet. She very cleverly spins that so that now the entire planet is their family and they're all in it together to save the world from Galactus. Ooh! The theme of family is used very cleverly here, but it's not just in the writing, it's also in the performances and also in the world building and the aesthetic of this film. It's really well done here. And speaking of the world, that's the next thing I would say I really loved about this film. Matt Shackman has such vision. He had such a strong vision for the Fantastic Four, and he was able to execute that brilliantly alongside the cinematographer, alongside the production designers, alongside the location scouts, everyone who was involved, hair, makeup, costuming. They did a spectacular job of creating this production that had such a singular, phenomenal focus and vision that really allowed the Fantastic Four to stand out from the crowd from across the MCU and also superhero movies at large. Now, it is strange and bizarre and coincidental that we did just so happen to get a superhero movie that does echo some of the aesthetic and feeling of 1960s nostalgia in the form of Superman by James Gunn. Like, that's a crazy coinkydink, okay? But I would argue that while Superman definitely has that feeling and that vibe, and also the way that the characters, particularly Superman himself, are characterized there, it feeds into the kind of Silver Age of comics vibe that they're going for, definitely. But Superman is distinctly set in the modern day. People have modern-esque computers and laptops and phones. You have Lex Luthor running his company like a Silicon Valley startup. Like, it does have that distinct modern day feel with just the kind of 1960s feeling and vibes surrounding it. Whereas Fantastic Four is like set in this alternative version of the 60s. Like, you feel like you've fallen headfirst into a Silver Age comic book, or even a live action version of Brad Bird's The Incredibles, right? Like, you feel like you're in that world, fully immersed. The technology here is designed to look like it comes from this era, even though it is far more advanced than the actual technology that we had in this earth in the 1960s. And so they did that kind of low-key thing with the TVA and that aesthetic, which I'm sure was also an inspiration for this, to kind of bring this world to life and give it that very distinct nostalgic feel. But what's really astounding here is that it never feels gimmicky. It feels so true and authentic to the world, to the characters, to the story. For instance, when it comes to the story, a big aspect is the trust and the relationship between the very public superstars, superhero, Fantastic Four family versus members of the public, you know, the rest of the world. The public has that almost naive trust in their superheroes, which we no longer see in the MCU proper. In Earth 616, that has long been destroyed, okay? You know, there's far more skepticism towards superheroes in the main MCU world, but here in Fantastic Four world, they love their heroes. Their heroes are on merchandising, they're fully branded, they have, you know, TV shows, specials, like they are icons, they are celebrities. And again, that ties into that kind of 1960s feel where people had a lot more trust and faith in governments and other members of authority before all of that broke down with a bunch of scandals that happened in the 70s and 80s. And then next up you have the story. I think the writing here is really strong too. I mean, this film had to accomplish so much. It had to set up the Fantastic Four's origin story. It had to establish the family dynamics that exists within the team. It also gave us the birth of Franklin, which is very unexpected. I had no idea that was going to happen in this film, but it did that, and it's something that hasn't been done in other live action iterations. So I'm glad that Matt Shakman kind of stepped away from the previous stories that have been told in live action to give us something fresh and new. But that introduced a whole bunch of issues and problems which we didn't see coming. And then, not to mention, you have this major, huge villain, both metaphorically and literally physically, in the form of Galactus, which I think is the first time we've seen him in live action as well. And so the way that they were able to tie that into the birth of Franklin and also the introduction of the Fantastic Four and this very unique pocket of the multiverse was really, really clever. Now, if I was going to add some critique of the story at this point, it would probably be that it was a tad rushed, you know, considering how much they did have to cover. I feel like the origin story of the Fantastic Four, I think it was done very well. You have Mark Gatiss, who is this like TV host, you know, personality, kind of giving us a quick rundown at the beginning. And I think it established the team really well, and it worked as an intro, but it felt like it was a decent solution to the issue of them not having enough time to really dive into the origin story of the Fantastic Four. And then you have bits of the story that seem to be missing as well, and I know that's definitely the case because you have a whole ass character who was supposed to be portrayed by John Malkovich just completely gone from this entire story. So they've definitely lifted some scenes here and there and cut a lot. I mean, this film is under 2 hours long, which is very short, especially considering how much the ground they had to cover. And so sometimes it does feel like we've missed a couple of parts. There was also one scene in particular that literally felt like there was a scene missing in that slot. I can't remember the exact scene, but I just remember Vanessa Kirby's face. I remember Vanessa Kirby's face reacting to something, and then we jump cut to something else that seemed very jarring. So yeah, it did sometimes feel like there were parts of this, chunks that were missing, and as a result the story sometimes felt a bit rushed, and some characters suffered more from that than others. We'll do a deep dive into the characters in a sec, but in particular Ben comes to mind as a character who really suffered from this, you know, cut of the film. Before we dive into a couple more critiques, on a positive note, another thing that I really, really loved about this film was the score. Michael Giacchino. Michael Giacchino, you will always be famous. This man, the talent involved. Ooh, Fantastic Four. Ooh. And this is coming from someone who does not care, who does not care about the Fantastic Four. Like, I was living for the score of this movie. Marvel has given us some excellent scores over the last couple of projects, and I shouldn't even be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised that it's really that good because he's had practice. Because guess what? My man also did the score for The Incredibles. I think that is so incredible. I think it's so fantastic that he's been able to deliver amazing scores for both of these movies. Before we get into the character deep dives, I did just want to touch on a couple of the negatives that I had for this movie, because even though I did enjoy it a lot, it wasn't pitch perfect, okay? And the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, maybe we should just take a break from CGI babies. Maybe we just need to put the babies down, or like, I'm sorry, but this isn't the first. This isn't even the second. This isn't even the third time that we have seen some dodgy CGI babies flying around in a comic book movie. We had it in The Flash, infamously, but also most recently we had it in Superman. And I didn't really touch on this in my review of the film, but you know, the CGI for that baby wasn't great either. The design was cool, but there's something about babies moving around frantically and unpredictably that just doesn't work with CG. I don't know if it's a mocap situation, I don't know if it's a modeling one, but there's something very off about CGI babies. I mean, just ask Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. Like, clearly we haven't advanced enough, okay, to have a bunch of CGI babies flying around in these comic book movies. And I'm afraid Fantastic Four is no exception. Baby Franklin, who actually played a very big role in this movie, really suffered from some less than perfect CGI. There were times when it was literally just the baby kind of floundering around doing his thing, and that was great. That was perfect. Great job to the baby. But then there were times when the baby needed a few enhancements, especially when he was being carried by Uncle Ben, you know, Ben Grimm, the Thing, and that's when things got a bit rocky, because now we're dealing with CGI versus CGI, and it was a bit messy to the eye for me. But I'm not just going to put this all on the baby, because there were also other elements of the CG that were a little bit rocky at times. To be clear, there was also scenes that were executed perfectly and were just like really smooth, really pleasing to the eye. But the times where it was a bit jarring, unfortunately, really stood out. I think Galactus, for the most part, was executed very well, very impressively. And actually, the first time that we see him, I kind of got a chill and a shock because he was just so commanding and imposing. That first shot of him really made me wish that I had seen this film in IMAX, because I think seeing Galactus in IMAX must be like mind-blowing. It must be like, like, I was really scared. There were moments where I was genuinely scared, like, oh, is he gonna reach through the screen and come at me? What's going on? Like, it was very, very well executed. But then there were moments where the CG was less than perfect and he looked a little bit like a video game character, which was unfortunate because he kind of lost a little bit of that weight, as a character and particularly a villain. And that's particularly a shame because so much of this film is so freaking beautiful. The cinematography here is absolutely outstanding at times, particularly when you have the beautiful production design and set design of the 1960s Earth world, but also the scenes that take place in space, where you have Johnny flying around and the team flying around in their ship. Like, people have compared it to like Interstellar. I'm not the biggest fan of Interstellar personally, but those sequences definitely give Interstellar visually, at least, and they are beautiful and striking. So to contrast that against some of the rocky earth-based action sequences that we got was a little bit of a letdown. Okay, so now let's dive into the performances and the character deep dives. Now, overall, I would say I was really impressed by Matt Shakman's direction of these actors, because it was clear that they were steering away from the previously quite melodramatic and quite cheesy and campy portrayals of the Fantastic Four. Here, everything is toned down several notches, and I think that makes sense because the world is so heightened. It's so aggressively 60s, but the characters themselves aren't. And so having that contrast really works here, because they just feel really authentic and true to the world. They don't feel like visitors on a set. They feel like they belong and this is just their everyday life. Even the volume at which they speak was quite low at times, which was a little bit of a downside at times for me, because I did struggle to hear some of the dialogue. I don't know if that was just in my screening and the tech in my cinema. Let me know if you guys had a similar issue. But yeah, these guys were definitely definitely more mellow. They were definitely more chill in the portrayals of the character. And so it did mean that sometimes I struggled to hear what each of them was saying. But I did like the overall direction that was taken with these portrayals. And the performances here were really, really strong. Okay, so now we're going to go through the characters in order of my favorites to the one that maybe struggled the most. Starting us off with MOTHA. MOTHA. Yes, the MCU has a brand new mother. In fact, I think she's the mother of all mothers. Actually, no, Angela Bassett. Queen Ramonda is the mother of all mothers, but Sue, you know, Sue is up there. Sue is up there. She's definitely taken Wanda's place. Sorry, Wanda's kids aren't real. The fact that Marvel and Matt Shakman and co were able to figure out a way to give us a fully pregnant woman in a comic book movie is such a feat. Like, I have no choice but to give them a round of applause. Like, they did that. I don't think we've ever seen something like that in a comic book movie before. They fully committed to that. They fully committed to Sue being pregnant and all of the stresses and anxieties and fears that Sue and Reed had about having this newcomer to their family. Little things like Reed having to like build the cots for the baby, and him, you know, prioritizing all of this scientific research and scans and all of that, trying to figure out what's going to happen to their child in light of their genetic mutations. Like, that was just so good. And the fact that Sue exuded this cool, calm and collected energy while she was pregnant, but that's not to say that she didn't have her own fears and anxieties, as she said, and she was able to like see directly into her womb. She was able to use her powers to see into her womb and check if the baby is okay. We see one instance of her doing this, you know, in Reed's lab, but you get the sense that she does this all the time to check in on her child. Like that. Oh my goodness, they actually did it. They actually fully committed to this, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And then that all leads up into the birth scene, which, first of all, F Galactus. F Galactus for real, because how dare he put this woman through such stress and trauma, forcing her to give birth instantaneously. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready for that. Galactus, when I catch you, well, I won't be able to do much. No, I'm not going up against Galactus. I've made many enemies in the past, but I ain't going up against Galactus. Sorry, that's where I'm gonna have to draw the line. But I'm definitely sending negative vibes to wherever Galactus is at the moment, because that was uncalled for. But that led us to a scene, a birthing scene, a scene that I never thought I would see in an MCU film. Like, this is there were so many firsts here. This was nuts, but it was done so well. And the fact that you have Sue pushing for dear life, literally, whilst Ben is also pushing and grunting at the wheel, and the ship is pushing through time and space and a black hole. Like, that was just excellent. It was just brilliantly executed, and I guess the first birthing scene in the MCU, and of course it would come from the debut of Marvel's first family. Like, you see how it all ties in together. I was so impressed. And you know who did that? It was Sue. Sue did that. She is the mother of Marvel. Sue was mothering in a way that no other Marvel character has ever mothered before. Then of course you have the scene, the moment where Galactus has arrived and they're trying to shove this giant they're trying to sort of shove this godlike being into an Illuminati triangle so that he can be ousted to some corner of the multiverse, and all other attempts have failed. They tried to trick him by plopping Franklin in the middle of the Illuminati triangle trying to use him as bait before doing an old switcheroo, but Galactus was too smart for that. And honestly, I think it was shocking and appalling that that was their grand plan. Have you seen this being? Have you seen this entity? You think you can trick him with an old switcheroo? Come on now, that wasn't the smartest idea, not gonna lie. But that failed, clearly. And so it was up to Sue to use everything, every single cell, every single mitochondria in her body to shove this deity into that Illuminati triangle. And that's how you get that scene where she is just voguing. She is mothering in ways that have never been seen on screen before. And honestly, I just have to give a whole standing ovation to Vanessa Kirby for doing that, because she absolutely ate that. She gobbled that scene up. Like, sis, she did what needed to be done. Absolutely. In terms of entries into the MCU, into superhero franchises at large, Vanessa Kirby has to be up there, because that debut was astonishing. And I can't wait to see Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm interact with other characters in the MCU proper, particularly the female ones, and especially if we, by some miracle, get a mothering. If we get an introduction between mother to mother, that is Sue Storm to Wanda Maximoff. If we ever get this, please, Kevin Feige, are you listening? If we ever get this, I don't know what I would do with myself, honestly. Like, I would just faint. Like, I would freak out. That would be amazing. Next up in the ranking, we have Reed Richards, portrayed by Pedro Pascal. Now, first off, I want to touch on the Pedro Pascal of it all. I know that this is a very hot topic. There seems to be some kind of smear campaign happening online against this man, and I just want to say, not on my watch. Not on my watch. I am not falling for that anti-Pedro Pascal propaganda. Not on this day. Not in this month. Not in this year. Hell no. Okay. I don't know what that's about. People are saying that there's some kind of PR firm that's been hired to do this. This is above my pay grade. Okay. All I know is that I'm a fan. Me personally, I am a fan of Pedro. Okay. I mean, we have a child together in the form of Grogu. So, like, you're never going to catch me. You're never going to catch me being anti-Pedro unless something crazy happens. Okay, so that's on one. But two, I will say that when I heard that he was going to be portraying Reed Richards, I wasn't ecstatic, because as much of a fan as I am of Pedro Pascal, I do think that he is creeping into oversaturation, overexposure a little bit, and I completely understand from his perspective, because he's been acting for ages and ages, literally decades, like literally since the 90s, and he finally got his big break, with Game of Thrones and The Mandalorian, and so now he has like all of these roles and opportunities flooding his way, and of course he's going to take them, but from an audience perspective, it is still important to have a kind of balance and allow the audience to miss you a little bit. And so there are times when actors, should kind of step back and refuse a couple of roles just to allow the audience some breathing space so that they can miss them. And I feel like Pedro has not been doing that. Like, he hasn't been refusing any opportunities that come his way. And so this year alone, I can think off of the top of my head, like 4 Pedro Pascal projects that have come out recently. I mean, you have Fantastic Four, of course, and you have Eddington coming up as well. But then I also saw him pop up in Freaky Tales, which was a horror movie that came out earlier this year that stars Jay Ellis from Insecure and Running Point. But Pedro was in that as well, portraying a character that's very similar to his Joel from, yes, The Last of Us, which had its 2nd season a couple of months back too. So that's a lot of Pedro Pascal in the landscape of entertainment, and we'll be getting more with the Mandalorian movie coming up, I think, next year. So I do feel like he's creeping into overexposure a little bit, and it certainly doesn't help that I do think there's an actor who would have been perfect in this role instead of Pedro, and that is Adam Driver. I think Adam Driver would have been an immaculate Reed Richards, and I know that he was proposed the role, but he rejected it. Marvel should have just thrown billions his way, quite frankly. Like, they should have just thrown everything his way to make this happen, because I do still think that he would have just been note perfect alongside Vanessa Kirby. So it is a shame that they weren't able to secure that and lock that down. But having said all of that, since we did get Pedro in the end, and since I am still a big fan of the guy, I will say that he did an excellent job as Reed Richards still. I think he portrayed a distinctly different character from the ones that we've seen him do before. Yeah, he is this like scientist, incredibly intelligent and incredibly obsessed with getting things right. You get the sense that he has a lot of guilt about what happened to him and his family when they went off into space the first time around and came back with these wacky, crazy powers caused by genetic mutations. And so he is really neurotic about getting things right and, you know, not making any mistakes, not missing anything again, because it could, you know, bring risk to his family the way that it did previously. I wish we could have explored that a little bit more in the film. Again, the script is a little bit compressed and some things are a bit rushed and brushed over, but that's definitely something that's there, even if it's not fully explored. And the depth of that and the weight of that is conveyed in Pedro Pascal's performance, because again, the script is lacking that depth and weight. And also what I particularly loved about Pedro's portrayal of Reed is just how open he was in showing how much he loved his family. He loves Ben, he loves Johnny, and he adores his wife. And the scene there's one thing that Pedro can do, okay, it's show love and adoration for a character that he's in a project with. And the scene where you have Sue lying on that ground and you have Richard just losing his damn mind, yeah, that was all Pedro. So even though on paper being the literal comic books, which I don't read, Reed Richards is supposed to be this like big old dickhead. Like he's really unlikable and abrasive of a character, even though he is a super genius and he invents all these things and has all of these ideas. And that's why I thought, you know, Adam Driver would be the perfect fit, because I do think he'd be able to convey that and portray that kind of character really, really well. But I think Pedro Pascal took the character down a slightly different path. And even though there are definitely elements of his version of the character that are definitely abrasive, but ultimately I do think that Pedro kind of softened some of the edges and some of the roughness of Reed Richards' character to give us a slightly softer, more amiable version of the character. That might piss some people off, I don't know, but I think it worked well to show the genuine love and adoration that he had for his family and his willingness to protect them at all costs. I will say one element of the character that automatically has him losing points left, right and center for me personally is his power set. I'm sorry, I don't think there was any way that Matt Shakman, Marvel HQ, you know, Kevin Feige, Pedro Pascal, anyone, I don't think there's any way that anyone could have salvaged this, because it's just inherently bad. It's just inherently goofy. Like it's just, there's nothing to be done. The stretch powers look dumb. Sorry, like, the stretch powers look stupid, they look silly, they look dumb, they look juvenile, I'm sorry. And it's tough. It's tough because there are moments, especially when he's fighting against Galactus, where you're really supposed to feel the weight of it. You're really supposed to feel like, damn, like he's being put through so much. Galactus is stretching him like an elastic band, waiting to see how far he needs to go until he snaps. Like Galactus was really doing that. He was playing with Reed Richards like an elastic band. Like how I used to play with my hair bands during a boring maths class. That's what Galactus was doing to Reed Richards. And it's crazy, and I'm supposed to feel scared and just terrified for this character. But I couldn't really get into it because the whole time I was thinking, man, that looks goofy. Sorry, but man, that looks goofy. And so I just want to take this moment to give a whole wave of love and appreciation to my good sister Kamala Khan, because Kamala had the good sense to completely dodge these stretchy powers in favor of doing some light crystal powers that work so much better visually and look so much cooler. Okay, so next up on the list you have Johnny Storm as portrayed by Joseph Quinn. And you know, I gave Joseph Quinn a lot of flack for being one of Hollywood's favorite white boys of the decade, apparently. Like, he's literally everywhere now ever since he appeared in Stranger Things season, what, 17? I can't remember. So I gave him a bit of a harsh time about that. And I still stand by everything that I've said, don't get me wrong. But I have to admit, you know, when it comes to his Johnny Storm, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I ended up enjoying his version of the character. I did still miss the zaniness and flirtatiousness and sassiness of Chris Evans as Johnny Storm. I do still think that's the best version of Johnny Storm. Sorry, like, I don't think Joseph Quinn was able to defeat that one, but his version was a lot more likable than I thought it would be, having seen like a couple of the first trailers and the first look of the character, where I thought he looked a little bit off. Like, I don't think he makes for a great blonde, and his blue eyes looked obviously fake, and also the accent. I'm just like slamming him now, but his accent, I'm sorry, these Brits doing American accents, sometimes it's a bit grating. Like, Vanessa and Joseph definitely struggled at times. There was literally a scene where they were literally just speaking in an English accent for a good 2 minutes, and I was like, maybe we could have done with a different cut of that one. But yeah, even though I had those reservations and those issues, I did still end up enjoying Joseph Quinn's version of Johnny Storm. And I think the main thing here is, first of all, how much he dove into being an uncle to Franklin. That was adorable. That was so sweet. I loved that. And I loved his interactions with Sue in particular. Now, the way he treats Herbie is so adorable as well, and that's the little inkling, that's the little tell that we get that he's going to be a great uncle. You see how that works? You see how that works? Another element I really enjoyed by the character is the fact that they gave him a talent. They gave him a purpose in the story as well, in the form of him trying to decipher and translate the message that was left behind by the Silver Surfer. And from these sounds and messages from across the universe, as well as a very quick translation from the Silver Surfer, he is able to decipher an entire language very quickly and very conveniently. But that's what he was getting on with, and I love that for him. I love the fact that he had something to do and proved himself quite valuable in the team to contribute to the mission overall. It really allowed him to show off his brains as well as his brawn. And of course, his brawn is always going to be impressive because he has the most impressive power set of the entire team. And the fire looks good. Not gonna lie, like, the fire was looking excellent, exceptional in this film. And then lastly, out of the team, we of course have Ben. Even though he is ranked last in my little ranking of the Fantastic Four, I still really enjoyed this character. I really like the character design, at least as far as I can, for the Thing. No offense. No offense. He's a very handsome rock man, I'm sure, but he's just not my type, for me personally. But I did really enjoy Eben Moss-Bachrach's version of this character. I think he might be my favorite, to be honest, just because he has such warmth to him. Eben Moss-Bachrach did a great job of conveying warmth and emotion and depth in his voice work for this character. It was really impressive. Like, even the little moments where he was talking to Sue and he says, like, "Are you pregnant?" Like, that was so understated and quiet. Again, like, I could barely hear, but it was just so effective. Like, you just felt like it was two people talking to each other. You didn't even notice that he was a whole CGI rock man in that moment. Like, that was just by the by, because the tone of his voice just felt so real and warm and passionate without being too loud and in your face. Like, raw. Eben Moss-Bachrach really did that. He was exceptional and gave an exceptional voice performance. Oh, he must have got some tips from Pedro Pascal as the Thing. But the only reason why he kind of ranks lower for me is because his story was cut. Like, his story was clearly cut from this film. You get a little inkling, a little hint of a little something between him and Natasha Lyonne's character. There was clearly something more happening there that was just cut straight out, and so it barely has any presence in the film. And the same goes for one of the thing's most famous character arcs, which is him struggling with his appearance post-accident, you know, kind of comparing how he used to look. He's described as the handsome astronaut, and then he lost all of that in the accident. That arc barely has a presence here. You know, you see a hint of it in that moment where he's looking at himself through the TV screen, but that's about it. And so you can definitely feel the fact that a lot of the thing's story has been stripped out from the final cut of this film, and I think it's a shame, and it does the character a disservice, particularly because Eben Moss-Backrack ended up being perfectly cast in this role. Speaking of perfect casting, I also wanted to give a shout out to Julia Garner as the Silver Surfer. I think she was fantastic. I think she was absolutely brilliant. That whole speech that she had where she said, "I herald death," I got chills. I was like, death for me? Like, I got chills. I thought she was fantastic as a Silver Surfer, and I don't know how involved she was in the physical performance because it is a CGI character. I don't know if there was like mocap involved or anything, but I think her voice acting was perfect, and I think it was nice that we got to see a somewhat human version of her in the film when we very quickly explore the Silver Surfer's backstory. And speaking of Galactus, what a cool villain. This is not a villain that has a whole extensive backstory, and it certainly isn't a villain where you can see both sides with. He's just an out and out bad guy. Like, he just has an insatiable hunger for eating worlds. He can't help it. And so he sees baby Franklin before he's even born. He sees baby Franklin as an opportunity to end this hunger, and he said, listen, either I'm taking the baby or I'm taking the planet. He did a Denzel. He said, I'm leaving here with something. I'm leaving here with something. And in the end, he left with nothing at all because the Fantastic Four was able to save the day. But I do appreciate Galactus as a villain still. I think he had quite the presence in the film, and like I said, I do kind of wish that I'd watched this in IMAX just so I could see the entry of Galactus in a massive screen, because I think that would literally have me quivering in my boots. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving the Fantastic Four First Steps an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on the Fantastic Four First Steps, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch your videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.